Welcome to another Telltale Books video. I'm Greg, and I'm going to be continuing my new Dean Koontz series with his second published story, his first science fiction story. A lot of people don't realize that Dean Koontz started his career primarily as a science fiction author and even got nominated for major awards. So he was doing really well. He was publishing in all the major magazines: Fantasy and Science Fiction, Galaxy, and If, and doing a great job building a career as a science fiction author. And then for some reason, he switched over to horror. But in 1967, he was trying to get something sold to the magazine of fantasy and science fiction. And he finally got lucky. He says in an introduction in the book, Soft Come the Dragons, where I read this story, he says there that he finally got lucky after sending like a dozen stories to Ed Furman at Fantasy and Science Fiction and getting rejected. Furman finally accepted Soft Come the Dragons and published it in the August 1967 issue of Fantasy and Science Fiction. It is just a short story. It takes place on an alien world where men have landed and are trying to live on this world, trying to establish a colony on this world. But there is a strange dragon-like life form that every so often a bunch of them will be flying through the air. And to look in their eyes is certain death for any man. So they're almost like Medusas, but they're dragons flying around in the air. And short stories, so that's really about all you get. The style of this is very 1960s, kind of experimental, very artistic, very well written, kind of poetic. But in doing so, it's 1960s, they were experimenting. It's a little bit of a non-traditional structure to the story. You don't get a beginning, middle, and ending, really. I mean, you don't get a problem that gets resolved here. This is not a John Campbell type of story, but it's a beautiful story. I'm not going to give this a top tail because I feel it's a little too unstructured. Needs to have a little bit more to it, especially to wrap it up. Needs to go someplace, and it really doesn't go anywhere. But it's, his second professional sale, so yeah. But even so, I read his first story, Kittens, and Kittens was a much superior story to Soft Come the Dragons. But I guess people liked it, and he named his very first collection after the story. And by the way, the Jack Gone illustration on the cover of this book is for the story Soft Come the Dragons. And this is Dean Koontz's first short story collection. It was an ace double connected with an early novel called Dark of the Woods, which is fantasy. Haven't read it. I'll be getting to that one. So that's Soft Come the Dragons. It if you if you're expecting something like Intensity or one of other of Koontz's best-selling horror books, Soft Come the Dragons is going to seem like it was written by somebody else. But understand that Koontz did have a totally different career at this time until I think like 1975 I think that's when he finally completely transitioned over to the horror and thriller genres and left science fiction behind. But before that, he was writing, I mean, I would define Soft Come the Dragons as typical new wave science fiction. And he was doing a pretty darn good job. So the next story he wrote was To Behold the Sun, which is also in this collection, and it was also published in fantasy and science fiction. I hope you'll come back and join me for that. And if you've read Soft Come the Dragons, leave your comments. Otherwise, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, and come on back for all the other Dean Koontz I'm going to go through. I'm going slowly through his entire bibliography. This was number 2. And join me for all the other stories and books that I talk about here on the Telltale